Welcome to Topic 5, Chapter 7, Labor Unions, presented by Logan McGarren, Oscar Cow, and Philip Barnes. What we'll learn today, we'll explain why the American workers formed the unions, summarize the history of these unions and their movements in the United States. We'll analyze the reasons for the decline in the labor movement, explain how labor management negotiated contracts, give examples of a national labor union and a local labor union, and describe a strike that was held by the union and how it was resolved. The formation of the American labor unions, American workers were not treated fairly in the industrial era, so they decided to form unions, which provided workers with protection from corporations that fight workers on their behalf. Unions helped bargain with companies to fight better working conditions, better wages for workers, and change the changes that fit the average worker. Overall, the idea of the union was to prevent exploitation. History of the American labor movement. The 1800s, unions such as the Knights of Labor and the American Federation of Labor began to battle their corporate overlords in strikes such as the Haymarket Square and so on. These union ideas soon transferred to the progressive era, the 1900s, which allowed unions to have greater autonomy. In 1905, Industrial Workers of the World, the first industrial labor union, national, was created. In the Great Depression, a surge in labor movements began to become more prevalent. FDR signed the National Industrial Recovery Act and the Taft-Hartley Act, and in the 1950s, there was a decline in unions. This is our timeline.
Reasons for a decline in labor movement. One reason attributed to the decline in labor movement are government regulations such as the Taft-Hartley Act. The act allowed states to pass right-to-work laws which curbed union labor growth. Additionally, feather bedding, the act of keeping excessive jobs, can be attributed to the decline in labor movements. Feather bedding limits the efficiency of production and increases costs of companies, leading to a decrease in competition in a free market economy. Other reasons for a decline in labor movements can be attributed to a linkage of labor unions to violent events. The Haymarket Square riot, which originally began as a labor movement advocating for an 8-hour workday, escalated into bombing, killing and injuring people. Additionally, the Homestead strike, which took place in the Carnegie Steel Mill, escalated into a skirmish between the Pinkerton Company and the government. How do labor and management negotiate contracts? Labor and management can negotiate contracts through 3 methods. They can do this through collective bargaining, mediation, and arbitration. Collective bargaining takes a conglomerate of lawyers and negotiators from both union laborers and management to bargain for a revised edition of a labor contract. The revised edition of a labor contract lasts for 8 to 5 years and solves hundreds of issues that cover the wages, work conditions, and the job security of workers. Mediation, on the other hand, takes a neutral third party to come up with a compromise that is non-binding and can be rejected by both parties. Arbitration is similar to mediation, but the compromise of the third party is imposed and legally binding.
Nationally, there are a plethora of diverse unions serving different occupations and thousands of employees. An example of such on the national scale is the National Education Association, safeguarding professions tied to the service of students. Emerging in 1870, the union champions the advancement of educational facilities and the improvement of working conditions. Through efforts in lobbying legislation or funding activism, this organization has challenged racial discrimination and expanded benefits in rights and pension for approximately 3 million members. In the local sphere, the Southern California Contractors Association has serviced their 300 or so members for almost half a century since its founding in 1974. This union oversees the plights of workers, ranging from carpenters to iron workers. By formulating master labor agreements with firms, the union negotiates mandatory holidays, wages, or safe working conditions and breaks. When organized bargaining fails or change is prohibited in industries, strikes are a forceful way to ignite change via the upheaval of operations. An instance of such a struggle can be seen in the postal industry during March of 1970, when postal workers were denied a pay raise by Congress. Struggling with the inability to afford a decent life in New York, many were left with no option but to voice their grievances openly. Following suit were numerous small postal unions in Chicago, Los Angeles, and Detroit, together crippling the mail services nationwide. In spite of the illegality of the strike and federal pressure on workers, the picketing continued until agreement was eventually reached. As a result of the battle, the Postal Reorganization Act was introduced, assigning postal staff federal benefits and higher wages. Workers also received the right to collectively bargain, and a larger union emerged, the American Postal Workers Union.